Before we begin tonight's story, let me ask you something. Have you ever looked at someone and thought you knew who they were? Maybe it was the woman who walks her dog every morning, or the quiet man who never misses Sunday service. We think we understand the people around us, but the truth is, we only see what they allow us to see. Sometimes, what's hidden is too painful, too strange, or simply too unthinkable to be spoken aloud. Welcome to Grandma's Stories. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the truths most folks are too afraid to tell. Tonight's story. Well, it might change how you look at silence. At mothers. At the very people you think you know best. Let's begin. It started with a storm. Not the loud kind that shakes the windows, but the slow kind, the kind that settles in and stays. That evening the rain had been falling for hours, drenching the pine trees behind Martha Claiborne's home in a gray hush. The dirt road that led to her house had turned to mud, and then came the knock. Martha lived alone on the edge of Maple Hollow, in a one-story house with peeling paint and a porch swing that had long since stopped swinging. People in town spoke of her with a mixture of pity and suspicion. They remembered her from years ago when she'd worked as a nurse, before she retreated from everything, before the light in her eyes had turned dim. When she opened the door that night, she expected to find a neighbor, or perhaps a lost traveler. But it wasn't either. Standing on her porch was a child, soaked to the bone, silent, no shoes, no name, just wide eyes and trembling fingers clutching a stuffed rabbit whose seams were coming apart. Martha didn't ask questions. Not right away. She just reached out and brought the girl inside, wrapped her in a towel, boiled tea. There was no panic in her movements, just a kind of eerie calm, as if she had been waiting. The girl never said a word. She didn't resist Martha's care. But her silence wasn't stubbornness. It was something deeper, something sealed. As Martha combed out her matted hair and laid out an old nightgown, she tried to ignore the chill crawling up her spine. There was something haunting about how the child watched her. The next morning, Martha called the sheriff's office to report the child. They promised to look into it, said they'd contact state services. But days passed, and no one came. No one claimed the girl. No missing reports matched. It was like she had appeared from the rain. Word spread fast in Maple Hollow. It always did. A strange child at Martha Claiborne's place. People made their own stories before the facts even had a chance to form. Some said Martha had stolen her. Others whispered about witchcraft. One particularly cruel man at the diner claimed the child was Martha's ghost, come back for revenge. But the girl stayed. Martha named her Lily. It wasn't much, just a name from a book on her shelf. Lily didn't argue. She took the name as if she'd always had it. And in time, Martha grew used to the quiet rhythm of her small feet on the wooden floors, her pale hands helping in the garden, her unblinking eyes staring out the window. Yet things began to shift. Subtly. The girl wouldn't sleep unless the lights were on. She flinched at certain sounds, the door creaking, the kettle whistling. Once, when Martha dropped a glass, Lily screamed. Not a startled yelp, but a deep, primal cry, as if something terrible had returned. When Martha touched her shoulder to comfort her, Lily recoiled as if burned. Martha never pushed. But she watched. And at night, she began to dream again. Dreams she hadn't had in years, of crying she couldn't soothe, of dirt under her nails, of a name spoken over and over until it became meaningless. Abel, Abel, Abel. One morning, Martha found Lily in the backyard, crouched in the dirt, digging with her bare hands. Not for fun. Not like a child, methodically, like someone looking for something they had buried long ago. Martha called her name, but Lily didn't respond. When Martha finally took her hands and led her inside, she noticed her fingers were raw and bleeding. That night, Martha stayed up long after Lily had fallen asleep. She pulled out a box she had hidden in the back of her closet. Inside were old photos, yellowed papers, and a tiny pair of baby shoes. She hadn't opened that box in over a decade. Not since Abel. She held the shoes for a long time. Her hands trembled. The room felt too quiet, as if even the walls were holding their breath. That's when she heard it. A whisper. Not from Lily's room, from beneath the floorboards. Martha stood frozen. The house was still. The wind outside had stopped. Only the whisper remained. Faint, familiar, able. She didn't go back to sleep that night. The morning brought a strange kind of silence. The air was thick with a waiting stillness, like the woods behind the house were holding their breath. Martha moved through the kitchen slowly, her hands trembling just enough to rattle the spoon against her cup. She told herself it had been a dream, just a memory dressed in sound, but her bones knew better. Lily sat at the table, sipping tea like she had always belonged there. Her eyes, wide and unblinking, followed Martha's every move. She still hadn't said a word. Martha wondered what it would take to hear her voice, or if the girl had chosen silence as a way to survive. They spent the day in quiet routine. Martha tended to her herbs in the windowsill while Lily sorted buttons from an old jar. The child never smiled. Not once. It unnerved Martha in ways she couldn't explain. Children were supposed to smile, weren't they? At birds, at funny faces, at the sun. But Lily remained untouched by such things, as though the light couldn't quite reach her. That afternoon, Martha stepped into town to pick up groceries. She didn't want to go, not really. But supplies were low, and the idea of staying inside with the girl another night made her chest tight. At the store, familiar faces avoided her eyes. Some nodded politely, others didn't bother. She could feel it in the air, the weight of questions people weren't brave enough to ask aloud. At the register, Margaret Holloway leaned over and whispered, "Heard you've got company now. Little girl, is it?" Martha didn't answer, just handed over her bills and waited for her change. Margaret didn't need confirmation. Her smirk said she'd already written the whole story. On the walk home, the wind picked up. The trees rustled like old men clearing their throats. Martha clutched her bag tighter. The path back to her house was lined with pine needles and shadows. By the time she reached her porch, dusk had settled, and the light inside the house glowed amber through the window. Safe. Or so it seemed. But when Martha stepped inside, the air was wrong. Off. She knew it immediately. The tea kettle had been knocked off the stove. One of the kitchen chairs lay sideways on the floor, and Lily was nowhere in sight. Martha called her name, softly at first, then louder. No reply. Panic rose in her throat like smoke. She checked the bedroom, the bathroom, the tiny back porch. Nothing. She found Lily in the hallway, standing still as a statue, her hand pressed flat against the wall. Her face was pale, and her lips moved soundlessly. Martha approached slowly. "What are you doing?" Lily turned and looked up at her. For the first time she spoke. "He's still in there." Martha's breath caught. "Who?" Lily didn't answer. She just pointed to the wall. The same wall that stood above the cellar. That night, Martha didn't sleep. She sat in her chair by the window, watching the trees sway in the moonlight. Lily had gone to bed without another word, curling up under the blankets like she'd done it all her life. But Martha felt the house shifting, breathing. Something was waiting below. And Martha, no longer sure what was real and what wasn't, began to wonder if she was the one who had been asleep all these years. The next morning broke with an overcast sky, gray and swollen, mirroring the heaviness Martha carried in her chest. She woke not from sleep, but from hours of stillness, too alert to drift off, too afraid to move. The whispering hadn't returned, but its absence felt just as loud. Lily sat at the kitchen table again, her tiny fingers tracing circles in the condensation on her glass. She didn't speak, not even a glance. Martha poured her tea and sat across from her, careful not to disturb the fragile silence between them. "He's still in there." That sentence echoed like a bell in Martha's mind. She hadn't dared ask Lily to explain. What could a child know about such things? But a part of her buried under years of grief and dust believed it, or wanted to. Later that day, Martha went into the basement. She hadn't been down there in months. The wooden stairs creaked beneath her, each step like a question. The air was colder than it should have been. Damp. She reached the bottom and stood for a long moment before turning on the light. Nothing. Just old boxes, rusting tools, and the smell of mildew. She walked slowly to the far wall, the one directly beneath where Lily had placed her hand. She pressed her palm against the cold concrete, expecting something, but it stayed solid, impassive. She knelt, searching for cracks, loose bricks, anything. Then she saw it. Not a hole, not an opening. A faint stain, long faded but still there, about the size of a child's palm. Her breath quickened. She touched it gently. It was dry, harmless. But something deep within her twisted. She stood quickly, nearly knocking over a rusted paint can. She didn't go back down the rest of the day. That night, she sat with Lily in the living room. The girl had taken to sitting by the fireplace even when there was no fire, just staring into the blackened brick as if it whispered secrets no one else could hear. "Do you remember anything before you came here?" Martha asked. Lily didn't answer at first. She just shifted slightly, drawing her knees up under her chin. "There was a door," she whispered eventually, "with red scratches." Martha blinked. Where was this door? Lily tilted her head as if trying to remember. Below, under everything. Someone locked it from the outside. The hairs on Martha's arms stood. She didn't press further. Some memories weren't meant to be pulled too hard. Later, as she tucked Lily into bed, the child reached up and touched Martha's cheek just once, barely a brush, and said, "You knew him, didn't you?" Martha's hands froze mid-motion. Her mouth went dry. "Who?" she asked, but her voice barely escaped her lips. "The boy in the box." Martha didn't respond. She couldn't. She simply turned off the light and left the room, her steps unsteady. Back in her own room, she stood at the window and stared into the woods. The trees swayed in the wind, branches whispering secrets she no longer wished to hear. Her reflection in the glass looked unfamiliar, older, paler, haunted. She remembered the year after Abel died, how she'd stopped speaking for weeks, how the neighbors had brought casseroles and soft words, but no one ever asked what really happened. They assumed crib death, illness, something silent and explainable, and she'd let them believe it, because the truth was heavier than any coffin. She never buried her son, not properly, not with flowers and farewells. She had hidden him, somewhere. And now a little girl had come, speaking in riddles and memory, stirring up a truth Martha had spent years forgetting. That night, the whispering returned. But it wasn't from the floorboards this time. It came from inside her own mind, and the voice was not her own. The following day crept in under a veil of pale light, the kind that makes everything look faded like an old photograph left out in the sun too long. Martha awoke with a weight in her chest, like something had nested there overnight. Her eyes burned with the sting of unshed tears, though she couldn't say why. In the kitchen, Lily was already at the table, humming softly to herself, her fingers moving over the rim of her teacup as if tracing something unseen. The tune she hummed was unfamiliar, yet it tugged at something deep in Martha's memory. "Where did you learn that?" Martha asked, settling into her chair. Lily stopped, shrugged. "It was in the dark. It helped me sleep." Martha said nothing, but the unease that had taken root in her the night before now bloomed into something closer to dread. Later that morning, she went out to the shed behind the house. It had been years since she'd stepped inside. The air smelled of rust and old wood, and cobwebs hung like curtains in the corners. She needed to feel useful, needed to touch something solid. She found her old gardening gloves, stiff with disuse, and began to pull weeds from the flower beds lining the fence. But the ground was stubborn. The roots clung like fingers, and the soil resisted her every motion. As she worked, she found herself muttering small things under her breath, names, phrases, prayers. It was the kind of talking she used to do back when Abel was a baby and she hadn't yet learned the habit of silence. She stayed out longer than she intended. When she returned inside, Lily was gone. Her heart jolted, then stumbled into panic. She checked the bedrooms, the bathroom, called out down the hallway. Nothing. She found the girls standing at the edge of the woods. "Don't go in there," Martha said, breathless, as she approached. Lily didn't turn. She stared into the trees, her small body rigid, as if listening to something Martha couldn't hear. "There's something moving," Lily whispered. "It doesn't walk like a person, it slides." Martha took her hand and led her back toward the house, saying nothing. Her grip was firm, almost too firm, but Lily didn't resist. That night, the wind picked up again. Leaves scattered across the porch like whispers on the move. Martha locked every door, drew every curtain, and left a light on in every room. She didn't know what she was guarding against, only that she had lived too long pretending the world was made of logic. Sleep, when it came, was not restful. She found herself back in the basement, though in the dream it was deeper than it had ever been. The walls were wet, the ceiling low. In the corner was a wooden chest. She opened it, Inside was a single baby shoe worn, stained, and soft with time. She turned around, and there stood Lily. But she looked older, wiser, and she was holding a photograph-an old picture of Martha, younger, smiling with a baby in her arms. "Why did you leave me there?" Lily asked, though the voice that came out was a boy's. Martha woke with a start, her pillow damp with sweat, her hands clenched around the sheet. She sat upright, the room around her humming with stillness. She didn't sleep again. In the morning, she made a decision. She took Lily's hand and walked her into town, past the diner, where the windows gleamed too bright, past the church, where the bell never rang anymore. She brought her to the clinic. The woman behind the desk looked up, surprised. "Can I help you?" Martha cleared her throat. "We need to see someone. Anyone. This girl. She needs someone who understands." The woman's eyes softened. "Is she your granddaughter?" "No," Martha said quietly. "She's a question I haven't been able to answer." Cope. They waited in silence. The room smelled of antiseptic and lemon. Lily sat still, her gaze never leaving the floor. When they were finally called back, the nurse looked kind but uncertain. She asked Martha to step outside during the initial evaluation. So Martha sat alone in the hallway, her hands folded in her lap, listening to muffled voices behind the door. After several minutes, the nurse stepped out. "She doesn't speak much," she said gently, "but she drew something." Quote. She handed Martha a paper. It was covered in jagged lines, but at the center was a house, and under the house beneath the floor was a figure, small, curled, surrounded by darkness. Martha stared at it for a long time. She knew that house. She knew that floor. And she knew what she had to do next. The sky had turned a heavy, bruised gray by the time Martha and Lily stepped out of the clinic. The breeze tugged at their sleeves as if urging them to move faster, as if even the weather knew what lay beneath their feet couldn't remain buried much longer. Martha held the drawing tighter than she intended, the paper already creased from her grip. She had said nothing to Lily on the walk back, her thoughts a tangled mess of memory and dread. The child remained quiet too, but not out of fear. It was something else, a knowing silence, as though she had already said what she came to say, and the rest was up to Martha now. When they reached the house, Martha didn't go inside. She stood at the edge of the porch and looked out at the line of trees swaying gently in the wind. The earth held stories. That much she understood now. Some of them whispered, others screamed. That night, after Lily had gone to bed, Martha descended the basement stairs again. This time she brought with her a lantern and a crowbar. The concrete wall stood where it always had, cold, impenetrable. But something in her body told her that wasn't quite true. She examined the edges, her fingers grazing the corners where time had begun to crumble the mortar. It took 3 strikes with the crowbar before the first stone gave way. A sharp puff of damp, cold air escaped, carrying with it the scent of soil and rot. She paused. Her breath trembled in her chest. It wasn't fear. Not exactly. It was the weight of truth nearing the surface. Stone by stone, she loosened a small section until she could peer into the hollow behind. At first, all she saw was darkness, but as her eyes adjusted, the outline of something wooden appeared. A box. Not a chest. Not a crate. A coffin. She didn't cry. Her hands found the edge of the opening and clenched tightly, her knuckles whitening. She had forgotten this. Not just buried it, but severed it from her memory entirely. Yet here, it was undeniable. She hadn't imagined the whisper, or the dreams, or Lily's strange arrival. She had locked away a piece of her life and her guilt in that hollow. And now, somehow, it had found its way back to her. When she emerged from the basement hours later, the house felt different. Not in a way she could name, but the walls no longer hummed with tension. It was as though the house had exhaled. In the morning, Lily stood in the hallway, watching her with those deep, endless eyes. "I remember him now," the girl said quietly. Martha stared. His name was Abel. The words hit like a wave. Not because they were unfamiliar, but because they were true. Martha knelt down slowly, not trusting her legs to hold her. "How do you know that?" Her voice cracked under the strain. "I saw his name," Lily answered, her tone calm, matter of fact. "On the inside of the box. Someone wrote it, like a prayer." Martha buried her face in her hands. "I don't know what happened to me back then," she whispered. "I don't remember making that box. I don't remember sealing it up. I only remember the sound he made the last night I held him. Like a gasp, and then silence. Lily didn't move. Didn't speak. Martha looked up at her, broken wide open. I tried to go on. To pretend. But I was never right after that. People stopped visiting. I stopped trying. I thought I could forget. I thought if I didn't speak of him, he'd go quiet inside me. Lily stepped forward and did something she had never done before. She reached out and wrapped her arms around Martha's shoulders. She was small, and the embrace was soft, but it held a strange strength as if a child was consoling a woman through centuries of sorrow. They stayed that way for a long time. Later that day, Martha made calls she had put off for years. She spoke with a counselor at the clinic, with a funeral director in the next town. She arranged for someone to come take the box from beneath her home and give it a proper resting place. She didn't explain the details. She only said, "He waited too long." The burial was private, a quiet spot under the pines. No headstone, just a small wooden marker carved with a single word, Abel. Only Martha and Lily attended. The air was still. Not silent, but still. The kind of peace that comes after a storm finally runs out of rain. As they walked back to the car, Lily spoke without looking up. "He forgives you." Martha nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks like dew sliding from leaves. "I hope I can do the same." They drove home in silence. The road wound through familiar trees, the tires humming softly against the gravel. The house came into view, its windows lit warm with the afternoon light. Inside, Martha placed Lily's drawing on the mantel, not as a warning, but as a reminder that even things buried deepest will someday reach the surface, and that the truth, no matter how terrible ways, finds its way back home. The days that followed passed like slow-moving clouds, not dark, but heavy with a weight that couldn't be named. Martha moved through the house with quieter steps, as though she feared disturbing something that had finally been put to rest. The house itself seemed calmer, less tense. The floorboards no longer creaked at odd hours, the pipes no longer groaned at night. Even the wind outside moved more gently through the trees. Yet something in Martha remained unsettled. One morning she awoke before dawn, not startled, but pulled from sleep by a sensation and emptiness beside her that used to be filled with hope. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft breathing coming from Lily's room down the hall. The child had settled too, sleeping through the night, no longer murmuring in her dreams. But Martha couldn't sleep. She got up and made tea, her hands steady for the first time in weeks. The steam curled upward, disappearing into the early light as she stood by the kitchen window, watching the trees slowly reveal their outlines in the gray. A deer stood at the edge of the woods, barely moving, as if unsure it had permission to exist there. It watched her, then slipped back into the trees without a sound. That afternoon she and Lily drove into the next town over, the kind of trip people take when they don't have a destination, only a need to move. They stopped at a thrift shop, browsed through aisles of forgotten things. Lily picked up a puzzle with half the pieces missing. Martha found an old music box with no key. "Why do people give away things they once loved?" Lily asked as they sat in the car, parked near the town square. Martha thought about it. "Because sometimes," she said slowly, "we can't bear to look at them anymore." Lily turned the box in her hands. "But they're still beautiful." "Yes," Martha whispered. "They are." Quote. They didn't speak much on the ride home. The sun set behind them, painting the sky in long strokes of orange and rust. Lily dozed off in the passenger seat, the music box nestled in her lap like a forgotten story waiting to be heard. When they returned, the house felt different again. Not darker, just quieter, as if it were watching them, waiting for something else to be unearthed. That night, Martha sat in the old rocking chair by the fireplace. She had started lighting it again, even when the weather didn't ask for it. There was something comforting in the flicker of flame, the scent of burning wood. She held a photograph in her lap. It was faded now, corners curled, but the image still clear enough. A younger Martha holding baby Abel, smiling in a way she no longer remembered how to do. She traced the outline of her face with one finger, wondering if it had really been her at all. Lily entered the room, wrapped in a blanket, and climbed into the chair beside her without a word. They sat like that for a long time, the fire casting shadows on the walls. "He used to sit here too, didn't he?" Lily asked. Martha nodded. He loved the sound of the wind, she said. It calmed him. Lily rested her head on Martha's shoulder. Do you think he would have liked me? Martha's voice trembled. I think he already does. Silence returned, soft and full. But under it, something stirred. Not fear, not grief. Movement. Lily looked up suddenly. There's someone outside. Martha stood quickly, crossing to the window. The yard was empty, the porch bathed in pale moonlight. No one there, she said, though her voice lacked certainty. But Lily didn't move. He was standing by the tree, watching. Martha's heart pounded. Who? I don't know, but he looked sad. Quote. They both stood at the window side by side, searching the shadows beyond the glass. The trees swayed gently. No footsteps, no voices, just the hush of the world holding its breath. That night, Martha couldn't shake the feeling of being observed. She checked the locks twice, walked the perimeter of the house with a flashlight. Nothing. But before bed she found something on the porch. A small pile of stones, carefully stacked, with a feather placed on top. She stared at it, her chest tight. The stones were smooth, worn by water. Not from her yard. The feather was gray, tinged with white. Martha didn't touch it. She simply closed the door and stood there, back pressed against the wood, wondering who still remembered the things she'd tried to forget. In the morning, the stones were gone. And in their place, someone had written a single word in the dirt. Forgiven. The wind that morning was restless, weaving through the trees like it had something urgent to say. Martha stood on the porch with her hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea, watching the forest edge with quiet suspicion. The word in the dirt had vanished with the dew, but the image of it still pulsed behind her eyes. Forgiven. She had not spoken the word aloud. Not once. And yet it lingered in every breath, like a ghost that didn't need permission to enter. Inside, Lily moved about the house with an ease that had not been there before. She hummed softly as she folded a blanket, set the table, fed the birds on the windowsill. But it wasn't the humming that unsettled Martha, it was the peace. Too quiet. Too soon. Children who've seen too much learn to become invisible. And Lily, in her small, knowing way, seemed to be shrinking even as she smiled. Around noon, Martha found herself in the attic. She hadn't planned to go up there, but her feet took her without asking. The stairs creaked beneath her weight, each step a soft protest. The air above was stale, thick with dust and old insulation. The only light came from a narrow window smudged with age. She opened a box near the back. Inside were things she hadn't seen in over a decade: baby clothes, a toy rattle, a scrapbook with pages too faded to read. As she turned each item over, her fingers trembled. Every object had a pulse. Every fold and thread remembered something she had spent years trying not to. Beneath the last blanket was a leather-bound notebook. Her own handwriting covered the first page. Abel's first word, light. He said it when I opened the curtain. Or maybe I imagined it. Maybe I wanted it to mean something. Martha sat down hard on the floor. Her knees ached. Her throat tightened. She flipped further into the book. The entries grew shorter, fragmented, until one day they stopped altogether. The final line was barely legible. I can't hold him anymore. She closed the notebook, pressing it to her chest. The house groaned around her, an old body aching from memory. And from downstairs, she heard Lily's voice. Martha, she called, not loud but clear. There's someone at the door. Martha hurried down, pulse racing, heart too large for her chest. Lily stood by the window, pointing. He was tall, thin, dressed in worn clothes. His hat was pulled low, and a canvas bag hung from one shoulder. He didn't knock. He just stood there, staring at the front steps like they might disappear. Martha opened the door but did not step out. Can I help you? She asked, her voice firm but not unkind. The man looked up. His eyes were sunken, tired. Sorry to trouble you, ma'am. I'm looking for a girl, about this tall. He held out his hand. Dark hair, quiet. She's been missing a while now. Martha's stomach turned. I found a flyer with your address scribbled on it, he added. At a bus stop outside Greywood. Martha said nothing. Behind her, Lily had retreated into the hallway, out of sight. Do you have a name? She asked finally. He hesitated. Evan, I was her uncle. Not by blood, but I took care of her for a while. until I couldn't. He pulled a photo from his pocket. It was old. Crumpled. The corners soft. A girl stood next to a man even younger. Her face was shadowed, but the outline was unmistakable. Martha glanced over her shoulder. "She's safe now," she said carefully. "She doesn't talk much." "I figured," Evan murmured. "She wasn't much for words, but she liked music. Used to sit for hours with that broken guitar of mine pretending she could hear the notes." He looked up. "Does she still do that?" Martha didn't answer. "Why are you looking now, after all this time?" His jaw tightened. "Because I owe her. I didn't protect her when she needed me most." Silence bloomed between them. "I can't take her," he added quickly. "I just wanted to see if she was alive. And if she is, if she's okay, I'll walk away. I just need to know." Martha stepped back. "Wait here." She found Lily sitting on the bottom stair, arms wrapped around her knees. "Do you know him?" Martha asked gently. Lily looked up, eyes wide but unreadable. She nodded once. "Do you want to see him?" A pause, then a shake of the head. Martha crouched beside her. "He says he won't stay. He just wants to know if you're all right." Lily thought for a moment. Then she stood, walked to the front door, and opened it herself. She looked at the man, and he looked back at her. No words passed between them. But something did shift in the air, like a tether loosened, a weight released. Evan took off his hat, placed it over his chest. "You look strong," he said. "I hope you stay that way." Lily nodded once, then closed the door softly. Martha stood beside her. "Are you okay?" Lily leaned her head against Martha's arm. "He left me before, but he didn't mean to." Martha brushed a hand over her hair. "Sometimes people leave because they're broken too. It doesn't mean you weren't worth staying for." Lily didn't respond. But later that night, she found the music box again. It still didn't play, but she cranked the side anyway, turning the silent key as if the song might one day return. And Martha, watching from the doorway, understood something for the first time in a long while. Some sounds live only in the memory, but even then they can still fill a room. That evening, the house held a strange stillness. Not the silence of fear or waiting, but the kind that follows a storm when the branches stop bending and the sky no longer trembles. Martha sat on the porch steps with a blanket around her shoulders, watching dusk soak into the trees. The last of the daylight slipped behind the ridge, leaving only outlines in memory. Inside, Lily had gone to bed early. She hadn't said much after the visit from Evan, only that she was tired, and the kind of tired that sleep couldn't quite fix. Martha had tucked her in without asking questions. Some things were too recent to name. Now, alone in the cool air, Martha listened to the wind pressing gently against the house. She wondered how many truths could live in one place before the walls gave out. But the house had held so far. Maybe it would hold just a little longer. She thought about what Evan had said about owing someone. It was a word she hadn't used in years, not since her own debt had gone unpaid. Not with money, but with silence. Forgiveness was a peculiar thing. People talked about it like a destination, a place you arrived at after enough time had passed. But Martha had learned it was more like a landscape shifting, difficult to cross and easy to get lost in. She had started the walk, though, and that had to mean something. The next morning, Lily didn't come downstairs right away. Martha let her sleep in, taking the quiet as a gift rather than a warning. She busied herself with breakfast baking biscuits, stirring eggs, slicing apples thin the way she used to when Abel was small. But by mid-morning she climbed the stairs, a plate in her hand. She found Lily sitting on the floor by the window, her back against the wall, the blanket from her bed wrapped tight around her shoulders. The music box lay open beside her, unmoving. "I didn't want to get up," Lily said without looking. "That's all right," Martha replied, setting the plate down beside her. "It's one of those days." Lily was quiet for a long time. "Did you ever wish you could erase a whole piece of your life?" she asked. Martha sat beside her. "Not erase, just understand it better so it wouldn't keep hurting." Lily turned her face slightly. "I don't think I'll ever understand why people leave." Quote, "They don't always mean to," Martha said gently. "Sometimes they're just trying to survive themselves, and sometimes they think silence is the only way to protect you. But it doesn't," Lily whispered. "No," Martha said, "it doesn't." They sat like that for a while, listening to the wind pressing against the glass. The old pine outside the window creaked slightly, like an elder shifting in its sleep. Later, Martha helped Lily wash her hair. The small act warm water, soft towel, patient hands felt heavier than usual, like she was rinsing something off that wasn't just dirt or dust. That afternoon, they found themselves in the garden. The soil was starting to warm, the season inching toward spring. Martha handed Lily a packet of seeds. "Marigolds," she said. "They grow fast, and they're stubborn, like us." Lily smiled faintly and began pressing the seeds into the earth. As they worked, Martha felt something loosen inside her. A knot that had been pulled tight for too long. She didn't need answers anymore. Only room for new things to grow. When they finished, Lily stood back and looked at the bare rows of dirt. "Will they really come up?" she asked. "If we give them light," Martha said. "And time." That night, they lit a fire in the fireplace. Lily curled up with a book, and Martha sat nearby with her sewing. The sound of pages turning and thread sliding through fabric was the only music. Then Lily spoke, her voice quiet but clear. "I had a brother once." Martha paused, needle suspended mid-air. "I don't remember him much, just little things. His laugh, the way he used to hide under the table and pretend he was a fox." Martha's voice was soft. "What happened to him?" Lily's eyes stayed on the flames. "They said he got sick, but I remember hearing a door slam, someone shouting. Then it was just me." Martha didn't speak. She only moved closer, laid a hand gently over Lily's. "I think that's why I found you," Lily whispered. "Because something broken in me recognized something broken in you." Martha's eyes stung. "Maybe that's how healing starts," she said. Two broken pieces choosing to hold each other. Outside, the wind stirred again. Not sharp, not wild. Just a soft exhale through the trees. And for the first time in years, Martha let it in. The days grew longer. Sunlight stayed past supper now, stretching itself across the hardwood floors like it was finally ready to return. The marigold seeds had begun to break through the soil, tiny green fingers reaching up with stubborn resolve. Martha checked on them each morning, a quiet ritual that gave shape to her hours. Lily sometimes joined her, sometimes not, but the silence between them had softened at it, no longer pressed against the walls like it once had. One evening, just as the sky turned the color of old peaches, Martha received a letter. It arrived without warning, tucked into the mailbox between a coupon booklet and a grocery circular. The envelope was pale blue, the handwriting familiar in a way that made her hands pause before touching it. She hadn't seen that script in over 15 years. She didn't open it right away. She brought it inside, set it on the kitchen counter, and stared at it as she stirred the soup. Lily sat at the table, coloring with a set of worn pencils Martha had found in the attic. "Is that from someone you used to know?" Lily asked without looking up. Martha nodded slowly. "Yes, someone who once mattered very much." She opened the letter after dinner, once the dishes were done and the kettle had cooled. It was brief. "Martha, I'm passing through Maple Hollow in a few days. I don't expect anything, but if you're willing, I'd like to see you. I'm staying at the Timber Ridge Inn, room 3. Walter." Her breath caught. Walter. He had been part of her past in a way few others were before Abel, before the grief, before everything got quiet. They had spoken of a life together once. Then he'd left, gently but completely. When he saw the edges of her sorrow harden into walls he didn't know how to climb. Now, after all this time, he was returning. Or at least passing close enough to wonder if he still existed in the folds of her memory. She folded the letter neatly and placed it on the table beside her. Lily watched her with those deep, unreadable eyes. "Are you going to see him?" Martha exhaled. "I don't know." Lily picked up the music box and turned it slowly in her hands. "Sometimes people come back to finish a sentence they never got to say." Martha met her gaze. "And sometimes they come to hear one." She didn't sleep much that night. Not from anxiety, but from something else. Restlessness with no clear direction, as if her life, which had settled into a fragile rhythm, was shifting again underfoot. The next morning she dressed carefully. Not fancy, just with thought. A soft sweater, her good boots, the scarf she used to wear on walks with Abel. She told Lily she'd be back before dark. The drive to Timber Ridge took less than 30 minutes. The inn was small and plain, tucked at the edge of the county highway, wrapped in pine trees and the smell of damp wood. She knocked once on the door marked 3, Camino. It opened slowly. Walter looked older, of coarse gray at the temples, thinner, the weight of time settling in his shoulders, but his eyes hadn't changed, still warm, still searching. "Martha," he said, like her name had been folded on his tongue for years. "Walter," she replied and stepped inside. The room was quiet. No radio, no television, just 2 chairs near the window and a coffee pot humming softly. They didn't speak at first. They just sat. Old habits settled between them like dust, gentle and unspoken. "I heard about Abel," he said eventually. "Long after. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing." "I wasn't ready to hear anything," Martha admitted. He nodded. "I never stopped wondering, though. About you. About the house. About the silence." She looked out the window. The trees swayed gently. "There was more to it than I ever told anyone," she said. "Things I buried in more ways than one. I figured," he whispered. She turned to him. "But I've been unburying it." Slowly. With help. He smiled, then sad and soft. "I'm glad." They sat a while longer, shared coffee, talked about little things, the grocery store closing, the new bus line through town, the way winters used to feel colder. Before she left, he stood and handed her something wrapped in tissue. "I found this a few months ago. I didn't know why I kept it. Now I think I do." She opened it in the car. It was a photo. Her and Walter on the porch of her old apartment, holding mugs, laughing at something just outside the frame. Abel wasn't born yet. The world hadn't broken. That night, she placed the photo in a small frame and set it on the mantel beside Lily's drawing. A different kind of memory. One that didn't ache quite so deeply. Lily came into the room, barefoot and quiet. "Did you say what you needed to?" Martha nodded. "Not everything, but enough." Lily sat down beside her. "I like it when people come back, even just for a little." Martha looked at her. "Would you like to write someone one day? Someone from before?" Lily considered this, then nodded. "Maybe, if I find the words." Martha touched her shoulder gently. "They're in you. Just waiting." That night, the house felt fuller. Not louder, not heavier. Just lived in. And outside, under the pine tree, the first marigold bloomed. The marigolds bloomed faster than Martha expected. Within a week, the garden beds had become small pockets of gold, scattered like sunbursts against the soil. Lily checked on them each morning, kneeling close, whispering something to each one as if greeting old friends. Martha watched her from the kitchen window, her hands wrapped around a chipped mug of coffee. There was a calmness in the girl's movements now, not joy exactly, but a kind of grounded stillness. She was beginning to belong to the space around her, like ivy finding something solid to cling to. The house, too, had softened. The creaks and sighs of the old floors no longer felt like reminders of what had been lost, but echoes of what remained. And for the first time in many years, Martha found herself humming while she folded laundry, or when she swept the porch. It surprised her how something as simple as a child's presence could pull warmth from a life so long chilled. One afternoon, while reorganizing the linen closet, Martha found a small box tucked beneath a stack of old towels. Inside were letters, dozens of them, yellowed and folded, bound with a fraying ribbon. She had written them in the months after Abel's death, words meant for no one, or perhaps for herself. Letters filled with apologies, memories, even pleas. She didn't remember writing most of them. As the sun slanted through the window, Martha read through each page slowly, like retracing the steps of a long, painful walk. She didn't cry. There were no tears left for that grief. But her breath caught at certain lines, the ones that still felt raw after all these years. At the bottom of the box was a final envelope. It was sealed and addressed, in her own handwriting, to whoever finds her. She opened it with shaking fingers. The letter was brief. "If you are reading this, it means she made it, that she got out, that someone found her. Please be kind to her. Please protect her. She carries more than her small body should have to. And if you ever wonder who she is, just know she's someone I would have given everything for." Martha folded the letter carefully and set it aside. She didn't know when she had written it, or for whom, but reading it now, she understood. It had been written for Lily. That evening, after supper, they sat on the porch as the last of the light disappeared. Lily was barefoot, her toes brushing the edge of the wooden steps, her arms tucked around her knees. "I used to imagine running," she said softly, "all the time. Not because I wanted to get somewhere, just because it felt like if I stopped, something would catch me." Martha listened, eyes on the horizon. "And now?" she asked gently. "I still feel it," Lily admitted, "but it's quieter." Quote. Martha reached out, placed a hand on the girl's shoulder. "You're allowed to stop running. You're safe here." Lily didn't reply, but her shoulders relaxed just enough to say she'd heard. The stars came slowly, one by one, until the sky became a soft canvas of light. They stayed until the air cooled and the sounds of the forest grew louder: crickets, wind, distant owls, familiar music. That night, Martha dreamed of Abel, but not as a baby, or the pale image her mind had clung to for so long. He was older, maybe 10 or 11, standing at the edge of a field, holding something in his hand. She couldn't see what it was. He looked at her and smiled, not the smile of memory, but something new, something real. He turned and ran, and instead of chasing him, she stood still and let the wind carry him away. When she woke, the room felt full of light, though the sun had not yet risen. She sat up slowly, her body aching in familiar ways. On the windowsill, the marigolds had opened wide. Down the hall, Lily was already awake. Martha found her sitting at the kitchen table with a notebook in front of her. She was writing. "What's that?" Martha asked. "A letter," Lily replied. "For who?" "I don't know yet." Martha nodded and poured herself some tea. The kettle sang a little louder than usual, as if proud to be useful. They sat in comfortable silence, broken only by the scratch of pencil on paper and the occasional sip from mismatched mugs. Outside, the world waited. Before noon, a knock came at the door. Not hurried, not hesitant, just firm. Martha opened it and found a woman standing there, early 40s, dark eyes, hair tucked beneath a scarf. She held a worn leather folder and wore the expression of someone who had asked too many questions and received too few answers. "I'm looking for a girl," she said. "Her name might not be Lily, but she's been missing for some time." Martha didn't speak. The woman glanced past her, toward the hallway. "I work with an agency for children who fall through the cracks." Martha's fingers tightened on the doorframe. "I don't want to take her," the woman added quickly. "I just want to know she's all right." Behind her, Lily appeared. She stood silently beside Martha, her eyes meeting the stranger's without fear. The woman knelt slightly, lowering herself to eye level. "You look like someone who's learned to be quiet. That's all right. I just wanted to see you with my own eyes, make sure you weren't lost anymore." Lily didn't respond, but she didn't turn away either. The woman stood. "I'll leave a number, in case she ever wants to know more, or if she wants to find someone. We have names, stories, pieces." Martha took the card. They watched as the woman walked down the path and disappeared into the quiet. Lily looked up. "Am I supposed to want that?" "No," Martha said. "You're supposed to want what's right for you." Lily nodded. "I think I already found it." And for the first time, Martha believed it too. The number sat untouched on the mantel for 3 days. It wasn't hidden, just left, sitting in the open, near the framed photo of Martha and Walter, between Lily's crayon drawing of the marigolds and the folded recipe for lemon cake neither of them had baked yet. Martha glanced at it now and then, not with fear, but with a quiet unease. Numbers could be doorways, and once opened, some doors refused to close. Lily never asked about the card. She saw it, of course. Her eyes always found the things Martha didn't mention, but she didn't ask what it meant. Not yet. Instead, she spent more time outside. The garden had become her space, a kind of sanctuary where she moved slowly and barefoot, pulling weeds, patting the soil, whispering things the wind seemed to carry away. She'd found a patch of moss behind the shed and declared it her thinking place. Some afternoons, Martha would spot her there, sitting cross-legged with her arms wrapped around her knees, staring at the sky like she was waiting for it to answer something. Inside, Martha found herself moving through forgotten corners of the house. She opened drawers she hadn't touched in years, dusted shelves she'd once stopped seeing. There were pieces of the past tucked into every room: Abel's old blanket, still folded in the linen closet, a chipped bowl with his name painted across it in childish strokes, the stuffed bear she'd once tried to throw away, only to find herself digging through the garbage that same night, hard in her throat. She wasn't ready to part with them. Not yet. But she didn't hide them either. One morning, while sorting a box in the attic, she came across a cassette tape labeled only with the word spring. She almost overlooked it, assuming it was blank, but something about the handwriting made her pause. It wasn't hers. Downstairs, she rummaged through a drawer until she found the old tape player she used to keep in the kitchen. She wiped the dust off, inserted the tape, and pressed play. At first, there was only static, then a voice, small, high-pitched, clear. "Mommy, are you listening?" Abel. Her knees buckled. She sank slowly into the nearest chair. The recording was brief, just his voice, babbling about the birds outside, something he'd seen in the clouds, a story about a squirrel that stole his apple. There was laughter hers, and his faint, distant, like it had traveled through time just to reach her. She played it again, and again. The third time, Lily appeared in the doorway. She didn't speak. She just stood there, listening, her eyes fixed on the tape player. "Is that him?" she asked softly. Martha nodded, unable to trust her voice. Lily sat beside her, knees drawn to her chest. "I like how he talks. Like everything is a secret worth telling." Martha smiled through the ache in her chest. "He used to say the world whispered to him," she said. "Like the wind was always trying to tell him something important." Lily looked at her. "Maybe it still is." Quote. They sat like that until the tape clicked off. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was full of presence, like someone had just stepped out of the room and might return any minute. Later that day, they walked to the small creek that ran behind the woods. It was shallow, filled with smooth stones and tiny fish that darted away from their shadows. Lily rolled up her pants and waded in, laughing as the water splashed around her ankles. Martha sat on a flat rock nearby, watching her. "You know," Lily said, squinting at the sunlight through the trees, "I used to think I was born from nothing." Martha looked up. "I didn't know where I came from, who I belonged to. It was like I just appeared." "You didn't," Martha said gently. "You were carried here by everything that's happened. Like a river carries stones. You didn't come from nothing. You came from survival." Lily thought about that. Then she crouched and picked up a rock, smooth and white, shaped like a teardrop. "I think I'll keep this one." That evening, Martha cooked dinner, while Lily sorted through a box of old photos at the table. Some were creased and faded, but a few were still sharp snapshots of birthdays, picnics, porch mornings with coffee and a breeze. Lily studied each one carefully, asking occasional questions. "Was this Abel's dad? Number? Just a friend? A good one? Did you love him?" Martha paused at the stove. "I did. And maybe, in some quiet way, I still do." Quote. Lily nodded, as if that made perfect sense. She held up a photo of a younger Martha in a hospital gown, cradling a swaddled newborn. "You looked so tired." "I was," Martha said, smiling softly. "But it was the best kind of tired." That night, just before bed, Lily approached the mantel. She picked up the card with the number and brought it to Martha. "Would it help you to call?" Martha hesitated. "Maybe. But only if you wanted to know what they had to say." Quote. Lily studied the card for a long moment. "Not yet," she said. "But maybe someday." She placed it back gently, beside the marigold drawing. "Let's not throw it away." "No," Martha said. "Let's not." And with that, Lily turned and walked to her room, barefoot, quiet, carrying her teardrop stone in one hand like a promise. Martha stayed there for a while, staring at the card, the photo, the tiny symbols of lives once broken and now mending. The house breathed with her, not heavy, not haunted, just alive. A soft rain came the next morning, steady and slow, turning the air thick with the scent of earth and pine. The kind of rain that asked nothing from umbrella, no rush, just a quiet permission to be still. Martha opened the windows halfway and let the cool breeze roll in. The marigolds bent gently under the droplets, not breaking, just bowing. Lily stood at the screen door, watching them with her arms folded across her chest. "Do you think flowers remember the rain?" she asked. Martha dried her hands on a towel and stepped beside her. "I think they wait for it, like an old friend." Lily nodded slowly, as if that made sense deep in her bones. They spent most of the morning indoors. Martha made biscuits and jam, a small luxury they allowed themselves on days like this. Lily curled up on the couch with a blanket and a library book she had chosen from the mobile van that passed through the town once a month. It was a book about faraway planets and quiet astronauts, and she read it as if each word were a map home. Martha, meanwhile, found herself returning to the letters, not the old ones she had written in grief, but the ones left unwritten, the ones that still hovered in her chest like fog. She took out a clean notebook and began, not for anyone in particular, just to let the thoughts spill. "Dear Abel," she wrote, "I saw your sister smile today. Not a big smile. Just the kind that sneaks up on someone when they think no one is watching. I don't know where she came from, not really, but somehow she reminds me of you. The way she tilts her head when she's thinking. The way she speaks only when she means it. She belongs here, and somehow that makes me feel like you're still nearby. Maybe she's not your sister. Maybe that's just something I needed to believe. But believing it has helped me heal. I hope that's all right with you." She paused, staring at the ink, then folded the page and tucked it into a drawer, not to forget, but to remember better later. In the afternoon, the rain let up, leaving the world soaked and shining. Lily suggested they go for a walk, and Martha agreed. They pulled on rubber boots and stepped into the woods behind the house, where the trail curved through the trees and dipped down to the edge of the creek. The stream had swollen from the rain, its current more eager than usual. Lily crouched at the edge, tossing in twigs and watching them swirl and disappear. "I used to think creeks went in circles," she said, "that everything came back around." Martha smiled faintly. "Maybe they do, in their own way." They walked further than usual, past the fork in the trail that led to the old logging road. At the edge of the clearing, Lily stopped. "There used to be a house here," she said quietly. Martha looked around. The clearing was empty, save for a few moss-covered stones and the skeleton of what might once have been a chimney. "I didn't know that," Martha said. Lily stepped carefully toward one of the stones. "I came here once, I think. Before. It felt like hiding, but not in a safe way." Martha joined her, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "Do you remember anything else?" Lily shook her head, then nodded, unsure. "Sometimes I remember the wrong things, or maybe they aren't memories at all. Just pieces of fear pretending to be something I lived." Martha crouched beside her, eyes level. "That's all right. You don't need to name everything." Lily reached into her pocket and pulled out the teardrop stone. She placed it carefully at the base of the old chimney. "For what was left behind," she whispered. They didn't speak on the walk back. The woods were thick with birdsong now, the trees dripping quietly overhead. It felt like the earth was rinsing itself clean. That night, as Martha prepared for bed, she noticed Lily standing in the hallway outside her room, holding something behind her back. "I made this," she said, stepping forward. She handed Martha a small envelope, taped shut and slightly crooked. On the front, in careful, blocky handwriting, was one word: "For when you're ready." Martha didn't ask what was inside. She simply nodded, her throat too tight to speak, and placed it on her bedside table. They hugged before bed. Not a quick embrace, not an obligation. A real one, arms tight, heads resting, hearts speaking the things their mouths still couldn't. That night the wind returned. It rattled the gutters and danced through the trees, but the house stood steady. And somewhere, between the drawers and the roots and the rain, Martha finally understood something. You don't always have to know where someone came from to love them like they've always been yours. You just have to stay long enough for the silence to soften. The envelope sat untouched for days. Martha saw it each time she reached for her reading glasses or placed her tea on the nightstand. It wasn't that she was avoiding it, at least that's what she told herself. It was just that some things asked to be opened at the right moment, and this didn't feel like that moment. Not yet. Lily didn't bring it up. She didn't watch to see if Martha had read it or ask what she thought. She simply left it there, like a seed planted deep in soil, trusting it would bloom in time. Spring had come early to Maple Hollow that year. The trees outside the Claiborne house had begun their slow unfurling, pale green tips softening the bare branches. Birds returned, building nests beneath the eaves. Every morning the world sounded newer. Inside, Martha was painting again. Nothing grand, just small canvases on the kitchen table, fields of color, layers of sky, a marigold or two. Her hands still shook a little, but not enough to stop her. Lily would sit across from her, sometimes drawing, sometimes reading, sometimes just watching the light move across the room. "Do you miss who you used to be?" Lily asked one afternoon, her voice so calm it barely rippled the air. Martha paused, brush suspended. "I don't know," she said. "I think I miss who I thought I was going to be." Lily nodded like she understood. Maybe she did. That evening, a knock came at the door. Not loud, not hurried, just a presence asking to be let in. Martha wiped her hands on her apron and opened it. It was Darlene. They hadn't spoken in nearly 3 years. The woman looked older, her hair grayer, but her eyes were still sharp, still kind in a cautious way. She held a small tin of muffins and a look that was half apology, half hope. "I was driving through," she said, though they both knew it wasn't true. "Saw the light, thought maybe I'd stop by." Martha stepped aside. "Dea, please." They sat in the kitchen while the kettle warmed, the silence between them thick but not hostile. Darlene glanced at Lily, who sat quietly at the table, flipping through a worn novel. "She's yours?" Darlene asked. "She's here," Martha answered. "That's enough." Darlene smiled softly. "That's more than most." Over tea, they spoke about nothing important. The road construction near the highway, the bookstore that had finally closed, the strange warmth of March. Then Darlene grew quiet, turning her mug in her hands. "I kept meaning to write," she said. "I just didn't know what to say." "You don't have to," Martha said gently. "I do," Darlene insisted. "I judged you. Back then. Maybe I didn't say it out loud, but I thought things I had no right to think." Martha looked at her, surprised at the sharp ache those words brought, even now. "You weren't the only one," she said. Darlene's gaze flicked to Lily again. "She's strong," she said, "like someone who's had to hold too much." "She is," Martha agreed. After Darlene left, Lily stood at the window for a long time, watching the car disappear down the gravel road. Was she someone important? She was, Martha said. In a way that still matters. That night, as the house grew quiet, Martha sat on the edge of her bed and picked up the envelope. She turned it over in her hands, feeling the weight of it not heavy, but dense, like something pressed between the folds of paper. When she finally opened it, she found a drawing inside. It was of the two of them, Martha and Lily, sitting on the porch, surrounded by marigolds. The lines were soft, the colors simple, but the feeling was unmistakable. Belonging. Not perfect, not unbroken, but real. Beneath the drawing was a single sentence, written in Lily's careful hand. "Thank you for not asking me to be someone I couldn't be." Martha pressed the paper to her chest and let the stillness of the room hold her. Not long after, Lily appeared in the doorway. "Couldn't sleep," she whispered. Martha lifted the blanket beside her. "Come sit." Lily curled up, head against her shoulder. They listened to the wind outside, and for the first time it didn't sound like it was trying to take something away. It sounded like it was guarding them. "I'm glad you found me," Lily said softly. "I didn't find you," Martha replied. "You came when I was lost. You brought me back." Cook. Lily closed her eyes, and within minutes, her breathing steadied into sleep. Martha stayed awake a little longer, her hand resting lightly on the girl's back, eyes fixed on the window where the sky had begun to shimmer with the first signs of dawn. There were still questions ahead, still rooms unopened, but for now, there was peace. And in that small, quiet room, two lives once untethered had begun, finally, to hold. The following days unfolded gently, like pages in a book you'd forgotten you loved. Each morning brought a different light into the house, sometimes golden and full, sometimes filtered through soft clouds that made the whole place feel like a held breath. Lily woke earlier now. She made her own tea, left notes for Martha on the counter in neat block letters, went to check on the garden, or found a feather in the moss. They were small things, but they stitched themselves into the rhythm of the house like thread through cloth. Martha, for her part, no longer felt the need to fill every silence. She moved through the days with a steadiness that surprised her, doing things she used to rush through, washing windows, hanging clothes to dry on the line, kneading bread with her sleeves rolled up, and the radio humming something old and warm in the background. It wasn't happiness. Not the loud kind that people talked about, but it was something close, something quieter, rooted. On the third morning after Darlene's visit, Lily brought home a stray dog. He wasn't big, but he was all ribs and skittish eyes, with fur the color of rust and paws too large for his body. She found him near the creek, shaking under a log. It had taken her half an hour just to get close enough to touch him. He didn't want to follow me, she said, gently guiding him into the yard. But I think he was tired of hiding. Martha stood at the porch rail, arms crossed loosely, watching them. The dog looked up at her, uncertain but not afraid. His tail wagged once, then stopped, as if unsure he was allowed to hope. We'll need to check him for ticks, Martha said. And fleas. I know. And he's probably hungry. Quote, I brought biscuits, Lily added, reaching into her coat pocket and producing a crumbled handful. They named him Birch, after the tree he'd been hiding beneath. That night, Birch curled up by the fireplace like he had always belonged there. Lily lay on the rug beside him, one hand on his back, her eyes half closed. Martha watched from the armchair, remembering the soft weight of Abel's head in her lap when he used to fall asleep in front of the television. She hadn't realized until now how much she missed that kind of quiet nearness. He doesn't flinch when I touch him anymore, Lily murmured. Not like the first day. He knows he's safe, Martha said. Lily looked up. Did you ever feel like that? Like you could finally let your guard down? Martha thought for a moment. Not for a long time, she said softly. But lately, yes. Lily nodded, as if she understood something deeper than words could explain. Later that week, Martha received a letter in the mail. Handwritten, no return address. It was from Walter. He didn't say much, just that he was thinking of her, that he hoped the spring had been kind, that he still remembered the way her laugh sounded on Sunday mornings. Martha read it twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in the box with the others. Not to bury it, just to keep it close. That night a storm rolled in. Not loud, not wild, just steady. The kind that made the windows hum and the gutters murmur. Birch paced a little at first, ears low, until Lily sat beside him and whispered into his fur. He calmed quickly, curling up by her side, their breathing slow and matched. Martha lit a candle on the kitchen table. The power flickered but held. She poured 2 cups of tea and left one on the table for Lily, who joined her a few minutes later with a book in hand. They read for a while, together but separate, 2 worlds unfolding side by side in the glow of the candle. Then Lily closed her book and looked up. Do you think the people who hurt us ever feel sorry? Martha's hand paused on her page. I think some do, she said. And I think some never look back long enough to see what they've done. Does it matter? Martha met her eyes. Maybe not for them. But for us? I think forgiveness is more about putting something down than letting someone off the hook. Lily nodded, slowly, like letting go of a rock you've been carrying too long. Exactly. The rain softened after midnight. The storm moved east, leaving the air clean and the ground full of new promise. In the morning the marigolds stood taller. Birch barked once at the breeze and then laid down again. And Lily, barefoot on the porch, smiled at nothing in particular. Her arms opened just slightly as if to catch whatever came next. It was a Wednesday when Lily asked if she could visit the library in town. Martha looked up from the sink, her hands still wet from rinsing strawberries. Lily hadn't asked for much these past few months. Most of her requests had been quiet and inward space to sit alone, time to walk among the trees. But this was different. This was reaching outward. Martha dried her hands slowly and nodded. We'll go after lunch. They hadn't driven into town together since before the snow melted. The road had changed, with the season ditches now lined with fresh wildflowers, and the air full of the kind of light that made even tired places look touched by grace. The Maple Hollow Library sat tucked between a bakery and a hardware store, its brick walls faded by time and sun. Inside, it smelled like dust, ink, and something older, like the breath of stories waiting to be remembered. Lily wandered off to the back shelves, where the worn paperbacks lived. Martha stood by the front desk, flipping through a newsletter about spring gardening. She wasn't really reading. Her mind wandered, catching on small thoughts like threads. How Lily had braided her hair that morning, the way Birch had barked softly as they left, as if offering approval. After a few minutes, Lily returned with 2 books clutched to her chest. One about constellations, one about courage. Martha smiled as she checked them out. On their way back to the car, they passed the bakery. A familiar voice called out, "Miss Claiborne?" Martha turned. It was Ada Hensley, one of the town's old-timers. She walked with a cane and a mission. "My word, it's been a while," Ada said, eyes sharp and kind. "I thought you'd gone and disappeared into those woods for good." Martha smiled politely. I might have, but I came out for library books. Ada glanced at Lily, then back to Martha. Your granddaughter? She's someone I care about. Ada nodded slowly, as if that was more than enough. Looks like you've done well, she said, and there was no edge in her voice, only recognition. They drove home with the windows down, the breeze full of pollen and bird song. Lily read the constellation book aloud, stopping to pronounce the Greek names, her voice steady but thoughtful. When they reached the house, Birch greeted them at the gate with a short, happy bark. He sniffed the grocery bag and wagged his tail as Lily handed him a corner of a biscuit. Later that evening, as the sun lowered behind the hills, Martha sat on the back steps with a notebook in her lap. She hadn't written anything since the letter to Abel. But now, words stirred. She began, Some days still ache, Abel, but they don't anchor me anymore. I've learned to walk with the weight, not against it. Lily's presence fills the spaces I thought would always echo. She doesn't erase you. She reminds me how to keep going. She paused, listening to the sound of Lily laughing inside something about Birch trying to balance a tennis ball on his nose. Martha smiled and kept writing. That night, Lily brought her a folded piece of paper. It's not a letter, she said, more like a map of how I see us. Martha unfolded it. Inside were shaped circles and spirals, arrows and stars. In the center, 2 small figures holding hands beneath a tree. No names, Lily said, but I think you'll know which one is you. Martha traced the figures gently. It's beautiful. Lily nodded, then turned away, her voice softer. Some maps don't tell you where to go. They just remind you you're not lost. They said goodnight early. The day had stretched them both in new ways. Martha lay in bed, the map beside her on the nightstand. Outside, the wind had picked up again, rustling the branches like an old lullaby. Sleep came slow but sure. In the quiet hours before dawn, a light rain began to fall. And in her dream, Martha stood beneath a marigold sky, holding the hand of a child she didn't need to name, while another walked just ahead, turning to Smilehole luminous and free. The morning arrived washed in silver. Mist hung low over the yard, draping the marigolds like veils. The pine trees beyond the garden stood motionless, their outlines blurred as if the world itself hadn't quite finished waking. Inside the house, everything was still. No kettle whistling, no pages turning, just the slow creak of floorboards beneath Martha's feet as she moved through the hallway. She paused at Lily's door, hand hovering over the frame. A soft snore from Birch curled out through the gap at the bottom. Martha smiled. She didn't knock. Instead, she stepped back and let the silence stretch, gentle and unbroken. After breakfast, Lily emerged with her constellation book tucked beneath one arm. Her hair was a mess, sleep-warmed and tangled, and her socks didn't match, but her eyes held that steady glow Martha had come to recognize, the quiet spark of someone who was finally safe in her own skin. I want to find Orion, she said, sitting at the table. Martha raised an eyebrow. The hunter? Lily nodded. He's the only one I can always spot, even when the sky forgets the others. We'll look tonight, Martha promised. If the clouds clear, the rest of the day moved like slow water. They did chores without speaking, much-washed linens, pruned back the lavender bushes near the fence, gathered wind-blown branches from the yard. Birch followed them as they worked, ears perked, tail thumping each time Lily glanced his way. In the late afternoon, a package arrived. The delivery truck pulled up quietly, tires crackling over gravel, and the driver, a young man with kind eyes and a muddy clipboard, handed Martha a plain cardboard box with no return address. She brought it inside and set it on the counter. Lily tilted her head. Expecting something? No, Martha said. But that doesn't mean it's not meant for us. Crad. They opened it together. Inside, wrapped in brown paper and lined with tissue, was a collection of old cassette tapes. Each was labeled with a date and a place, some marked with school, others bedtime, and one, at the very bottom, with a single word, hope. A small note was tucked beneath the final tape. The handwriting was shaky. Martha thought these belonged with you. I didn't know what to do with them, and I didn't want to throw away someone's voice. Maybe they'll help you remember the parts that still matter. W. Lily picked up the tape marked Hope and turned it over in her hands. Whose voice is on these? Maybe mine, Martha said. Maybe someone I once loved. They didn't listen to them that night. Instead, Martha placed the tapes gently in the drawer beside her bed, wrapped in a scarf that still smelled faintly of cedar and thyme. After dinner, they walked out to the field behind the house. The clouds had cleared, just enough to give the stars room to shine. Lily lay back in the grass, arms folded behind her head, eyes scanning the sky. Martha sat beside her, knees pulled up, the damp earth cool beneath her hands. "There he is," Lily said, pointing. Martha followed her finger to a cluster of stars, 3 in a row for the belt, and a sword just barely visible. "You always find him," Martha said. "I think he's easy to love," Lily whispered. "He's not perfect, but he's clear." Quote. They lay in silence for a while, the hush between them filled with crickets and the occasional yip of a fox in the woods. "Do you think stars remember who looks for them?" Lily asked. Martha looked at her, the child's face lit in silver and shadow. "I think they do," she said. "And I think they wait for us to look up." Lily rolled onto her side. "When you were my age, did you believe in second chances?" Martha smiled faintly. I believed in endings." Quote. "And now? I believe in circles. Not the kind that trap you, but the kind that bring you back to where you belong." Lily seemed to carry those words like something precious. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a slip of folded paper. "This is for you," she said. "Not to read now, just to keep. In case you ever need to start over again." Martha didn't unfold it. She tucked it into the same drawer where the tapes now rested. Later that night, as the house settled around them, Martha stood at the window of her bedroom, looking up at the stars. Orion was still there, holding his ground in the sky like an old promise. Behind her, the quiet tick of the clock reminded her how far they'd come from that first knock at the door. From the girl in the rain with no name. From the woman too afraid to remember. She reached for the hope tape and held it for a moment, then placed it back down without pressing play. Not tonight. Tonight didn't need any more noise. It had stars, and the breathing of a child asleep just down the hall. And for the first time in years, that was enough. The next morning brought a sudden warmth, the kind that made the air feel heavy and the sky hum with anticipation. Martha opened the windows early, letting in the breeze while she watered the garden. The marigolds had stretched even taller overnight, their heads tilted like they were listening for something. Lily lingered longer than usual in her room, the door slightly ajar. Martha heard her humming a quiet tune, wordless, familiar in the way forgotten lullabies are. Birch sat just outside, tail thumping now and then, content to wait. By mid-morning, Martha found herself drawn back to the drawer beside her bed. She hadn't meant to open it. She had only gone in search of a pen, but her hand brushed against the folded slip of paper Lily had given her the night before. It felt light, but deliberate, like it held more than its size suggested. She unfolded it slowly. Inside was a single sentence, written in Lily's careful print. "You didn't save me. You let me save myself." Martha sat on the edge of the bed, her breath catching in her throat. For a long time she just held the paper, letting the weight of the words settle into her. Down the hall, Lily appeared in the doorway, barefoot and quiet. "You read it," she said. "I did." They didn't speak for a moment. The air between them was full but gentle, like the silence after rain. "I didn't want you to think I was something you fixed," Lily said softly. Martha stood and crossed the room. She knelt, meeting Lily's eyes. "I never wanted to fix you," she whispered. "I just wanted you to know you weren't alone." Lily blinked, then nodded. Her eyes held something steady, something Martha hadn't seen in her when she first arrived. That afternoon they listened to one of the tapes. Not hope, not yet. They chose one labeled bedtime, 1991. The voice was Martha's, younger and lighter, reading aloud from a children's book about a bear who couldn't sleep. Abel's laughter, faint and distant, echoed in the background like a wind chime caught in memory. Lily closed her eyes as it played. She didn't cry, she just listened. When it ended, Martha turned off the player and let the silence return. "You sound happy," Lily said. "I was then. Do you miss her? That version of you?" Martha thought about it. "I miss her, but I don't want her back," she said, "because she didn't know what I know now, and what I have now is enough." That evening, they walked past the garden and through the woods behind the house, following the trail that curved near the creek. The water was low, its surface glassy and quiet. Birch trotted ahead, pausing every so often to sniff at fallen branches or splash into the shallows. As they crossed the small wooden footbridge, Lily stopped and pointed. There, cry. Beneath the trees, almost hidden by vines, stood the remnants of an old bench, half-rotted, moss-covered, but still standing. Martha hadn't noticed it before. They cleared away some of the ivy, brushing off leaves and dirt. I think someone used to sit here, Lily said. A long time ago. Maybe they were waiting. Or maybe they just wanted to listen. They sat for a while, letting the woods speak. Birds called to each other through the canopy. The water moved in slow conversation over stones. Martha leaned back. I used to be afraid of places like this, she said. Not because they were empty, but because they echoed. Echoes aren't always bad, Lily said. Sometimes they help you hear what you missed the first time. When the sky began to darken, they headed back. The house, when it came into view through the trees, looked small but rooted, like it had finally stopped bracing itself against the past. That night, Martha took out the hope tape. She didn't play it. She just held it in her hands, sitting by the window as the stars returned one by one. Lily appeared, wrapped in a blanket, and sat beside her without a word. Birch settled at their feet, sighing into sleep. I think, Martha said quietly, that I'm ready for whatever comes next. Lily rested her head on Martha's shoulder. Me too. Outside, a breeze moved through the pine trees like a hand smoothing a page. And inside the house, two hearts once frayed had begun, finally, to write their next chapter, not with erasure, but with grace. The next morning broke wide and blue, the kind of sky that made even the worn porch board seem touched by light. Martha stood barefoot by the screen door, a cup of tea warming her palms, while Lily knelt by the marigolds, gently brushing dew from their petals. Birch lay sprawled beside her, half asleep, his head twitching at the occasional fly, content in the peace they had built. Martha found herself thinking about the tape again, the one marked Hope. She had kept it near the player since the night before, like an unopened letter. Not out of hesitation anymore, but from respect. Some things deserved to be met with full attention. After breakfast, Lily wandered into the woods with her journal and a canteen of lemonade. She didn't say where she was going, but Martha didn't ask. Trust had replaced worry. There was freedom in that kind of stillness, earned, not assumed. The house felt different in Lily's absence, not empty, just quieter in a way that reminded Martha of how far they had come. She moved through the room slowly, dusting the bookshelf, refolding blankets, tucking small things back into their places. When she came to the hallway closet, she paused. It had been years since she'd opened it fully. Inside were boxes stacked high, most labeled in a faded scrawl. Winter clothes, old recipes, photographs. But one box, sitting slightly apart on the floor, was unlabeled. She sat cross-legged on the carpet and pulled it toward her. The cardboard gave under her fingers, soft from time. Inside were layers of fabric baby clothes, a hospital bracelet, a tiny knitted hat. All Abel's. Martha didn't cry. She only touched each item like a mother learning her child again. Beneath the blanket, she found a folded paper, a poem, written in her own hand, one she had forgotten entirely. He came like morning through my window, soft and small and full of light, and though he left too early, he never left my sight. She read it aloud, her voice low and even, letting the words settle like dust. Later that afternoon, Lily returned, her cheeks flushed from sun and wind. I found a hollow tree, she said, taking off her shoes at the door. Big enough to sit inside. I think it used to be struck by lightning. It's broken, but beautiful. Martha handed her a glass of water. You always find the good hiding places. They usually find me first. Quote, they ate dinner outside that night, bread, cheese, and sliced apples on a wooden tray, with napkins folded between their knees. The wind had turned warmer, brushing their faces like a memory made real. When the stars returned, they sat quietly. Lily rested her chin on her knees, watching the sky like she expected something to answer back. Martha stood and disappeared into the house for a moment. When she returned, she was holding the cassette. Lily looked at it, then at Martha. You're ready? I think I've been ready. I just needed to remember I was. They went inside and sat by the window. Martha placed the tape in the player and pressed play. At first, there was silence. Then a hum, gentle, familiar, her voice speaking softly. This is for tomorrow, for when the world feels heavy and the night is longer than you expected. For when you don't know what comes next, but you keep going anyway. A pause. Hope isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just the sound of your own breath, steady and stubborn. Sometimes it's the hand you didn't know was reaching for you until it held you still. The tape clicked softly. Lily looked over at Martha, eyes glinting with something more than tears. Something steadier. You made that for yourself? Martha nodded. I didn't know it at the time. But yes, I'm glad you kept it. So am I. They didn't say much more that night. They didn't need to. Before bed, Lily placed a small folded drawing on Martha's pillow, a sketch of the hollow tree she'd found, with a tiny figure sitting inside it, surrounded by roots. Above it, written in a loop of gentle script, even broken things can hold shelter. Martha turned out the light, holding the drawing close to her chest. Outside, the wind had slowed. The stars, unbothered by time, watched quietly over the hills. And in the room where grief had once slept alone, two souls rested in the gentle hush of something finally beginning. The next few days passed like breath soft, unmeasured, and oddly sacred. There was no single event to mark their passing, just the ordinary details of living. Laundry drying on the line, the scrape of chairs across the kitchen floor, the hum of the radio on low volume as the afternoon light drifted across the walls. Lily spent more time drawing now, not just sketches, but full Pagestany scenes of places that didn't exist, or maybe did, but only in dreams. Forests lit by floating lanterns, a house with roots instead of a foundation, a girl with wild hair and a dog that never left her side. Martha watched her work in quiet awe. There was something in the way Lily's hand moved, deliberate, unhurried, that reminded her of how she used to tend her garden. A kind of reverence. One morning, Lily appeared in the kitchen with a shoebox wrapped in twine. I made this for you, she said, setting it gently on the table. Martha untied the knot and lifted the lid. Inside were dozens of folded scraps of paper, each labeled with a word in Lily's neat handwriting. Warmth, quiet, lemon, after, wind, able. They're all the moments I didn't want to lose, Lily said. So I put them where you keep things safe. Martha didn't speak. She only reached across the table and took Lily's hand, holding it with a tenderness that required no words. That afternoon, the phone rang. Not many people called anymore. The few who did were always met with the same calm voice, and often Martha let the answering machine handle the rest. But this time, something nudged her to pick up. Hello? A pause. Then a familiar voice. Martha, it's Walter. Her heart fluttered a dance, then steadied. I wasn't expecting. I know, he said, but I was passing through again. And I'd like to see you, just for a minute. If you're willing. Quote. She hesitated, looking toward the hallway where Lily had disappeared moments before. All right, she said, 1 minute. They met at the edge of town, in the old cafe where they used to get coffee and sit in the corner booth like they were hiding from the world. Walter looked older still, but his smile hadn't changed. It reached his eyes like a song he hadn't forgotten. You look well, he said. I feel like myself again, she replied. And that's a rare thing. They talked lightly. About the road, the strange weather, a bird he'd seen that morning perched on a church steeple like it owned the place. Then his expression turned more serious. I wanted to tell you something, he said, folding his hands. Back then, when you shut down, when everything broke, I didn't know how to hold it with you. I thought stepping away was the kindest thing I could do. Martha looked at him for a long time. And now? Now I think kindness would have been staying, even if I didn't know how. Martha nodded slowly. We do what we can, but sometimes it's not enough. I'm sorry, he said. I know. They left it there not with closure, but with understanding. When Martha returned home, Lily was waiting on the porch, Birch curled at her feet. Was that him? She asked. It was. Did it help? Martha thought for a moment. It didn't hurt. Lily nodded and reached into her pocket. I want to show you something. Quote. She led Martha to the edge of the woods, to the hollow tree she'd discovered weeks ago. But this time something was different. A wind chime hung from a branch above it, simple, made from old spoons and fishing wire. It clicked softly in the breeze, delicate and off-key. I made it for him, Lily said. For Abel. Martha blinked back the emotion that rose suddenly in her throat. I didn't know how to say goodbye. So I made something that could keep speaking. Quote. They stood there in silence, listening to the wind touch metal, the sound barely louder than breath. Later, as dusk fell, Martha sat in the garden, one hand in the soil, the other holding a piece of paper Lily had given her from the memory box. It said, "Even if we're not whole, we're still enough." She tucked it into her apron pocket, and under the evening sky, with marigolds nodding in the breeze, she began humming a tune she hadn't sung in years. Not for Lily. Not for Walter. Just for herself. The wind shifted the next day, cooler, sharper, carrying with it the scent of something distant. Not storm, not snow, but change. Martha felt it before she named it. The way a pot of water begins to tremble just before boiling. It stirred in her bones, in the quiet pull of the earth beneath her feet. She was weeding the far edge of the garden when Lily approached, her footsteps soft across the grass. She stood with her arms crossed, eyes squinting toward the tree line. "There's someone coming," she said, not as a warning but as a fact. Martha stood slowly and turned. At first, there was nothing. Thin a figure emerging through the trees. A woman, tall, dark-haired, walking with purpose but not urgency. She carried a canvas satchel and wore boots caked in dust. Birch growled softly beside the porch but didn't move forward. He stood still, watching. The woman raised a hand in greeting. "Afternoon," she called. "Are you Martha Claiborne?" Martha nodded, wiping her hands on her apron. "Depends on who's asking." The woman stopped a few steps short of the porch. "My name's Miriam. I work with the registry office in Creswell County. I've been looking for someone, and a few old threads led me here." Lily stood behind Martha now, half-shadowed by the doorframe. "What kind of someone?" Martha asked. The woman took a breath. "A girl. She went missing from a foster placement nearly 3 years ago. No official search anymore. No charges. Just a name sitting quiet in a drawer." Martha said nothing. "I'm not here to take her," Miriam added gently. "I just wanted to know if she was still alive. If she landed somewhere decent." Silence stretched between them, long but not hostile. Then Lily stepped forward. "I'm not going back," she said evenly. "You can't make me." "I know," Miriam replied. "And I won't. That's not why I came." Quote, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. "I found this last month. It was tucked inside a book donated to the county office. It's addressed to you." She held it out. Lily hesitated, then took it with both hands. "I don't know who wrote it," Miriam continued, "but I thought you should have it." Then, with a nod to Martha, she turned and began walking back the way she came. No questions. No papers. Just a breeze left in her wake. Inside, Lily sat at the kitchen table and turned the envelope over. Her name was written in pencil smudged but legible. She opened it slowly. There was no letter, just a drawing. A child's hand. A house. A figure standing beneath a tree, waving. In the corner a tiny heart with the initials TJ. Lily stared at it for a long time, her thumb brushing the corner. "Do you know who that is?" Martha asked. "I think it's my brother," she whispered. "I had one. I don't remember his name, but I remember the way he used to hum when he was scared. And once he told me that if we ever got lost, we'd leave notes in books." Martha sat down across from her. "I didn't think I'd ever find anything," Lily added. "I thought I'd imagined him, that he was part of what I made up to feel less alone." She folded the drawing and pressed it to her chest. "I was wrong." Quote, they sat together for a long time, the late sunlight slanting through the windows, catching the dust in the air like slow rain. That night, Martha wrote another letter to Abel, just a few lines. "You would have liked her. She doesn't need to be rescued, but she lets herself be loved. I think that's braver." She didn't tuck it away this time. She left it on the windowsill, weighted by a stone from Lily's collection. Later, Lily found it and didn't say anything, but she set a daisy next to it. A quiet offering, a thank you in her own language. Before bed, Lily asked if they could walk out to the hollow tree. The wind was calmer now. The chimes they'd hung weeks ago barely moved, but the soft clinking was enough to make the path feel alive. They stood beneath the branches, the moon hanging low, and Lily placed the drawing in a tin box tucked behind the roots. "For him," she said, "wherever he is." Then she looked at Martha. "I don't want to forget anymore, not even the bad parts. They're mine." Martha touched her shoulder. "Then we'll carry them together. And under that broken tree, wrapped in stars and quiet memory, they began the next piece of the journey. Not healed, but healing. Not finished, but free. The morning after they left the drawing at the hollow tree, the world seemed unusually quiet, as though even the birds had chosen stillness over song. A pale sun filtered through the kitchen window, casting long rectangles of light across the floor, warm and unmoving. Martha stirred honey into her tea, listening to the soft clink of the spoon against porcelain. Lily sat across from her, chin resting on folded arms, the kind of silence in her that no longer felt heavy, only full. "Do you think he's alive?" Lily asked suddenly. Martha didn't answer right away. She set the spoon down, watching the tea swirl, slow and golden. "I think," she said carefully, "that some people stay with us even if they're not where we can see them. And sometimes they find their way back when we least expect it." Lily nodded. "I think he was close, though. That day, I felt it." They didn't speak more about it. Some truths didn't need to be named again. They were simply folded into the day like a letter tucked between pages, always there, always waiting. Later, while Martha tended the garden and Lily swept the porch, a breeze returned, gentle and steady, stirring the chimes by the hollow tree. Even from the house, Martha could hear the faint metallic notes. They sounded different that day, less like wind and more like breath. By early afternoon, the mailbox held a small surprise. It wasn't a letter. Not exactly. Just a wrinkled postcard, edges softened by travel. The front showed a lighthouse, its beams stretching into a night sky. On the back, scribbled in blocky, hurried handwriting, "TJ made it to the coast. Safe. Will write again soon. Tell Lily she was right about the stars." No name, no return address, just a drawing in the corner, a small figure with a backpack, standing on a hill. Lily read it 3 times. Then she smiled. "I knew it," she whispered. That evening, they baked, not out of need, but because the scent of vanilla and cinnamon made the house feel like it had grown roots. Martha measured slowly, letting Lily crack the eggs and spill the sugar. Birch hovered nearby, tail sweeping the floor in hopeful anticipation. They sat on the porch as the cake cooled, feet bare, the scent curling into the dusk. "I think I'm not afraid of forgetting anymore," Lily said. Martha turned to her. "What changed?" "I realized forgetting and forgiving aren't the same. I can carry what happened without letting it carry me." Martha exhaled, a sound soft as leaves falling. "You're wiser than I was at your age." "I had to be." They didn't speak for a while after that. Just watched the sky deepen into violet, then ink, then star-pricked velvet, the kind of sky that didn't demand anythingly offered space. Later, in bed, Martha found herself unable to sleep. She rose quietly, stepping through the darkened house. She passed Lily's room, her breathing steady. One arm draped across Bertrand, made her way to the back door. The path to the hollow tree was still warm beneath her feet. She stood before it for a long moment, then reached into her sweater pocket and placed something at the base. A tiny envelope, no larger than a matchbox, sealed with a pressed flower. Inside it, a note that read, simply, "You are not alone. Not ever again." She stepped back and let the night take it. When she returned to the porch, she saw a figure sitting in the rocker, Lily, wrapped in a blanket, her eyes half closed but alert. "I knew you'd go," Lily said. "You're not asleep?" "I'm not tired. Just full." Martha sat beside her, the rocker creaking beneath her. "I'm proud of you," she said, her voice just above a whisper. Lily didn't reply right away. Then, with a small, tired smile, she leaned her head against Martha's shoulder. "I'm proud of me too." Quote. The wind passed through the trees like an old song. The chimes near the edge of the woods sang once, then settled. And beneath that wide, watching sky, with nothing left to outrun, the two of them sat wrapped in the kind of quiet that can only come after a long journey, unshaken, and entirely their own. The first true heat of summer arrived the next morning, not the gentle warmth of spring, but a deeper, fuller kind of sun that settled into the bones. The air shimmered slightly over the gravel path, and even the bees moved slower, their wings humming in a lower key. Martha rose early, before the sun had reached the windows, and opened every door in the house to let the cool linger as long as it could. Lily stayed asleep longer than usual, her breathing soft beneath the ceiling fan's slow rotation. Birch snored lightly on the rug by her bed, his paws twitching now and then, chasing something in dreams. There was no urgency in the day, no appointments, no lists, just space. Martha spent the morning rearranging the pantry, not because it needed it, but because her hands wanted to move. She found jars labeled in faded ink, some dated years back, a tin of dried lavender, a recipe card for her mother's peach preserves tucked behind a box of flour. She placed the card on the counter and smiled. "I should make that again," she said aloud to no one. Lily came into the kitchen just after noon, hair wild and eyes still fogged with sleep. She poured herself a glass of water and stood by the sink, watching the birds flit back and forth between the feeder and the fence line. "I think I want to write him," she said. Martha didn't ask who. She didn't need to. "Do you want help?" "No," Lily said, shaking her head. "But maybe, when I finish, you could read it. Just once." Martha nodded. "Whenever you're ready." That afternoon, Lily disappeared into the shade beneath the old elm behind the house, a notebook in her lap, the blue pen she always kept tucked in her boot now twirling between her fingers. Martha stayed close but didn't intrude. She knew the shape of that kind of work, the quiet excavation of self. She'd spent enough hours with her own notebooks, pages filled with thoughts she hadn't known were inside her until they spilled out. The sun crept higher, then dipped again, stretching the shadows across the yard like long hands reaching home. When Lily finally returned, her notebook was closed, a pressed daisy marking the page. They didn't speak of it. That evening, while they shelled peas on the porch, a car slowed near the end of the road. Not stopping, just crawling past, windows down, music faintly audible. Martha looked up, one hand still full of pods. Lily followed her gaze. They both watched it disappear into the curve, leaving only the dust to settle behind. "I used to think that was what I wanted," Lily said after a moment. "To be in a car, just going. Away. Somewhere. And now? Now I think I just wanted to stop feeling like I didn't belong anywhere." Quote. Martha reached over and gently brushed a loose strand of hair behind Lily's ear. "You belong here," she said. "You always did, even before I knew you." That night, just before sleep, Lily knocked on Martha's bedroom door. She held out the folded letter. "Will you read it? Just once. Then I'll burn it." Martha took it gently, unfolded it under the lamp's soft glow, and began to read. It wasn't long, just a page, but it held more weight than any letter she'd read in her life. "Dear TJ, I don't know where you are now, or if this will ever reach you. But I want you to know I kept the memory of your humming. I kept the drawing you left for me. I kept the promise I made that day in the dark that if I ever found the light, I'd leave a trail for you. This is my trail. I'm not broken anymore, not in the way I feared I'd always be. I still carry it, all of it, but it's not heavy now. I hope you found your sky. Love, Lily." When Martha looked up, Lily's eyes were full but steady. "Can we burn it together?" she asked. They walked out to the fire pit, stars above them like freckles on the dark. Lily struck the match. Martha held the paper, and as the flame caught, curling the edges inward, neither of them looked away. They watched it disappear, not in grief, but in release. Afterward they sat in silence, the coals pulsing faintly, the air around them cooler now. "I think that was the last piece," Lily whispered. "Then we'll build something new," Martha said. "From here." The embers crackled quietly, sending soft sparks into the sky. Not as ashes, but as beginnings. Summer folded into itself like a tired breath. The garden began to brown at the edges. The marigolds, once golden and full, now drooped slightly in the heat, their petals crisping like old letters left too long in the sun. The wind had lost its urgency, moving in slow circles that no longer whispered promises, only memory. Martha sat on the porch most evenings now, alone more often than not, her hands idle in her lap. Birch lay beneath her chair, twitching in his sleep. Lily had started walking deeper into the woods each day, always with her notebook, always alone. She said she was mapping something, a trail maybe, a shape of what she'd lived. She didn't show the pages. She needs to be the one to name it, Martha had told herself. But that didn't make the silence easier. One morning Martha woke to find Lily gone. Not just on a walk. Not out in the garden. Gone. The note was simple. "I needed to know if I can carry myself. I'll come back if I find out I can't, but I think I can." Martha stood in the doorway for a long time after reading it, the paper trembling slightly in her hands, though the wind was still. She didn't run after her. She didn't call anyone. She made tea, fed Birch, Saturday in the same porch chair where she'd first watched Lily draw that crayon map of the world. Hours passed, then days. The house changed again slowly, like breath after sobbing. The rooms felt larger, not because they were empty, but because Martha had filled them once more with the ache of not knowing. She wrote another letter to Abel. She's gone. Not lost, but gone. She left because I gave her the space to. Or maybe because I didn't. I can't tell the difference anymore. I want to believe this is what healing looks like, but part of me just feels hollow. She folded the letter and placed it in the hollow tree, pressed between the wood and the stone Lily had once left behind. Then she stopped writing altogether. Weeks later, a storm came. Not loud, not violent, just long. It rained for 2 days straight, the kind that soaks through walls and thoughts alike. The creek overflowed, washing away the edges of the garden path. The chimes were torn from the tree. Birch refused to leave the kitchen, and when it passed, something was different. The hollow tree had split. Not completely, just enough to change its shape. Inside, the letter to Abel had dissolved. The ink bled into the grain, unreadable. Martha stood in the rain-soaked earth, mud at her ankles, staring at the broken trunk. She didn't cry. She just whispered, "Then let it be gone." That night, she dreamed of Lily. But in the dream, she wasn't a child anymore. She was walking through a city Martha didn't recognize, crowded streets, bright signs, her face older, harder. She moved with purpose, notebook still in hand, her eyes searching the faces of strangers. She didn't look back. And when Martha tried to call out, her voice didn't come. Only a hum, soft, familiar. A sound Abel once made when he was scared. When Martha woke, the house was dark, and the wind had returned. Not gentle, not fierce, just present. On the table beside her bed sat a small envelope. No return address. Inside was a single photo, a street mural, somewhere far away. A girl with wild hair and a dog at her feet, both looking forward, not at the camera. Spray painted across the wall behind them were 5 words. "You didn't imagine any of it." Martha stared at it for a long time. Then she turned it over. And on the back, in Lily's handwriting, just one sentence: "Tell the next one they'll survive." She placed the photo in the window, beside the last marigold of the season. Outside, the wind carried nothing but dust. But inside the house, something stayed breathing.